So, what if the very thing that's pushing you to succeed is also kind of quietly stealing your peace? Today, we're going to unpack a really powerful idea, especially for anyone who feels like they're constantly chasing that next big thing. We're talking about something called the ambition trap. I mean, it's a feeling a lot of us high achievers know all too well, right? You set a goal, you work like crazy, you sacrifice, and then you finally get there, you cross that finish line. But instead of this, lasting satisfaction, it's like another finish line just pops up way off in the distance. And here's the hardest truth about ambition. A lot of the time, that finish line keeps moving because the real race, well, it was never really outside of you to begin with. And this really gets to the core of the whole problem. Picture this. You hit the sales target, you get that big promotion, you finally launch the company, and for a second there's this wave of relief, maybe even a little excitement, but then it's gone. And it's replaced by this weird emptiness and this almost desperate need to figure out, okay, what's next? That feeling, that's exactly what we're going to dive into today. So that leads us right into our first section here, which we're calling the winning that feels empty. And I think that name just hits the nail on the head because it perfectly describes that hollow kind of victory that so many ambitious people secretly feel.
You see, there's this really crucial shift in mindset that happens. The thing that once felt like this thrilling accomplishment, well, it starts to just feel like the bare minimum, like a baseline expectation. Suddenly, success isn't something to celebrate anymore. It's just an obligation, a box you have to check before you can move on to the next thing. The extraordinary just becomes ordinary, and all the joy just kind of gets lost along the way.
This quote just nails it. You start living in the gap between where you are and where you want to be. Think about that. Your focus is just so locked onto the future, right? On what you haven't done yet, that you literally can't be present and appreciate where you are right now. And that gap, it just becomes this constant source of restlessness, this nagging feeling that you're always behind, no matter how much you've already accomplished. So, what do we even call this cycle? Well, that brings us to our next part. Let's actually define the ambition trap. Because, once you can name something, you can start to understand it and maybe even dismantle it. Okay, and this is so important. This isn't some personal failing on your part. It's actually a predictable feature of how our brains are wired. I mean, your mind is incredibly good at adapting. When you achieve something, sure, you get that nice rush of dopamine, but your brain, it recalibrates like almost instantly. And that new level of success, that just becomes your new normal. And there's a name for this. The official psychological term is hedonic adaptation. And this is the exact reason why the thrill of getting a new car or landing that new job or winning a big award, it just fades way faster than we think it will. It's like our internal happiness meter just keeps resetting back to its default setting, which leaves us always searching for that next big hit to feel good again.
And this really shows the pattern perfectly. On one side, you've got the promise ambition sells you. That little voice that says, okay, this next win, this is the one that will finally make me feel complete. This will bring me peace. But then on the other side, you have the pattern, the reality, a super brief high, and then boom, you're right back to feeling like you're not enough. And that feeling is what pushes you to chase the very next goal. That right there is the trap in action.
Okay, but to really escape the trap, we've got to go deeper than just understanding the psychology of it. We need to look at what's fueling this whole thing in the first place. And that brings us to a much more, reflective section driven by wounds. You see, it turns out not all ambition is created equal. The energy that drives us to achieve things, it can come from two very different places. It can be sourced from a place of inspiration, of purpose, or it can be sourced from a place of pain and fear. And figuring out which one is fueling you is absolutely critical. And this lays out those two sources so clearly. On one hand, you have purpose. Are you being pulled forward by a positive vision, something you really want to create? Or, on the other hand, is it pain? Are you being pushed from behind by a fear? A fear of being insignificant, a fear of failing, a fear of just not being enough. So this really is the fundamental question you've got to ask yourself. Are you running towards something, or are you running away from something? Is your ambition an act of creation, or is it an act of escape? Is this about building a life you genuinely love, or is it about running away from a feeling you just can't stand? Seriously, the answer to that question changes everything. And a lot of the time, that pain that's pushing us is something we've never even fully processed. It's an old wound, a really deep-seated insecurity. And this quote is such a powerful reminder of that. If you cannot talk about it, it may still be controlling you. The things we try to suppress, they don't just disappear. No, they just find other ways to run our lives. And sometimes they disguise themselves as relentless ambition.
Now, hearing all this isn't meant to be discouraging. Actually, it's the total opposite. This realization, this is the key to your freedom. Which brings us right to our next section, discovering what we're calling the strength in feeling. Here's something that's so crucial to get. So many of us were taught that being strong means you bury your emotions and just power through. But real strength, true strength, isn't about not feeling pain. It's about having the courage to actually feel it without letting it break you. Look, pain is an inevitable part of life, right? It only turns into that long-term suffering when we resist it, when we deny it, or when we try to outrun it. And this is where you find the hidden gift inside of hardship. When we actually allow ourselves to process difficult experiences, they can completely transform us. Hardship can strip away the ego that keeps us trapped. It removes all those false priorities. It can actually increase our empathy, build a true resilience, not a brittle one, but one that's flexible and authentic. And maybe most importantly, it reveals what really, truly matters. Okay, so how do we put all of this together? What's the path forward? Well, that brings us to our final section, building a new definition of success. Here's a really practical framework to think about. Number 1, pause. Actually pause to celebrate your wins. Let them sink in before you rush off to the next thing. 2, learn to feel, not just achieve. Practice letting your emotions in instead of just suppressing them. 3, let hardship teach you. Reframe it as a teacher, not just some obstacle in your way. And finally, number 4, define what success means to you beyond just performance metrics and milestones. Ultimately, what this is all about is expanding your definition of what a good life even is. It's about making room for all the things that don't show up on a resume. Things like inner peace, real connection with other people, serving something larger than yourself, and finding a genuine sense of meaning. And I want to end with this really powerful thought. Maybe the goal isn't to be less ambitious, it's to be whole enough that ambition becomes an expression of purpose. See, this isn't a call to just ditch your drive. It's an invitation to heal the parts of you that are using ambition as a shield. The goal is to become so whole, so secure in your own worth, that your ambition is no longer this desperate cry to prove yourself, but a joyful expression of your true purpose. Just think about that for a second. What would you build then?